Morning, everyone. My name is Rosado. I am an elected Supreme Court Justice here in Bronx County. I was born in Santiago de los Caballeros and immigrated here at the age of 4. Welcome to our distinguished panel, Diversities and Dominicans in the New York's Judiciary. We are excited to be here. As a Dominican and a woman, I am overjoyed by the president of Hostos Community College, our extraordinary Daisy. I am going to introduce our first panelist today, and he will then introduce the second one. And going forth, we will continue to do that. We will open up the panel to questions once all the panelists are done speaking. Our first speaker is the Honorable Rolando Acosta, who is currently the presiding justice of the First Department. He was raised in the South Bronx and Washington Heights after immigrating here from Dominican Republic at the age of 14. He is a graduate of Columbia College and Columbia Law School and sits on the Board of Trustees for Columbia College. He is also in the Hall of Fame for Columbia University Athletics Hall of Fame. Rolando spent most of his legal career serving in public interest area and was elected to civil court in 1997. He became the first judge to be elected to the Supreme Court of Dominican descent, that is, in 2002. In 2008, the then governor appointed Rolando Acosta to the First Department, making him the first judge of Dominican descent to be appointed to the Appellate Division. And he is now our presiding justice, which means he's the boss of the First Department and our highest ranking Dominican. Without further ado, the Honorable Rolando Acosta.
Thank you so much, Llinét, for your kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be with you, albeit virtually. I am glad to see that we are all able to continue to observe these traditions thanks to technology. So I'd like to speak to you today on the importance of diversity in the judiciary and the status of Latino representation on New York's bench. I will go over some basic premises of the essay that we presented, and my colleagues, Justice Mendez, will dig a bit deeper into the numbers as they pertain to judges of Dominican descent. Justice Ventura and Judge Badamo will go over their particular experiences into their respective courts. Now, the importance of diversity in the judiciary and the status of Latino representation on New York's bench are fundamental to the credibility of the judiciary. As I am sure you all recognize, diversity and inclusion are not just abstract concepts that warrant lip service in the legal profession, although there's a lot of that gets done. These are concepts that are at the heart of promoting justice and respect for democratic institutions and the rule of law. So it is therefore difficult, I believe, for me to overstate the importance of ensuring that our judiciary reflects the makeup of the citizenry. For one thing, diversity on the bench, I believe, lends credibility to a justice system that underrepresented groups such as women and people of color, including Dominicans, have historically viewed with suspicion and trust. It is tremendously important for citizens to see themselves reflected in the judges who serve them, because a diverse judiciary engenders confidence that the courts, the last bastion of justice, have the requisite moral authority to dispense justice to all. So in addition to strengthening public trust in our institutions, I also believe that a diverse judiciary improves the adjudicatory process because, as Professor Cheryl Liefeld has noted, the presence of jurists of various backgrounds, and I'm quoting her now, can introduce traditionally excluded perspectives and values into judicial decision-making, unquote. In other words, she's telling us that judicial diversity brings a variety of experiences and views to the bench, which trickles down to the legal and the factual decisions that judges make, and ultimately to the quality of justice that we dispense. At bottom, I believe diversity on the bench not only legitimizes the third branch of government in the eyes of its citizens, I believe it also brings us closer to achieving true impartial justice in every case. So the obvious question then becomes, well, how is New York doing? Well, and that is exactly what we want to talk about today. Well, when I became a lawyer in the 1980s, and I'm not going to tell you when exactly because that's going to date me. It needs to be, but there were only a few judges in New York who looked like me. In fact, I keep a photograph in my chambers that depicts all of the Latino judges in our state in 1985. There are only 13 judges in that photograph. Now, nearly 35 years later, there are approximately 105 Latino judges in New York. I believe that this is progress, but clearly it's not enough for Latinos or for other underrepresented groups. So although New York is one of the most diverse states in the country, as of December of 2014, our state ranked 24th in judicial representativeness with respect to ethnic and racial diversity. And it ranked 14th with respect to the proportion of women on the bench. So we're not even close to the top. Presently, according to statistics collected by the New York Unified Court System and the Latino Judges Association, Latinos represent nearly 20% of the population of New York, but only 8% of the judiciary. That is, of the more than 1,270 judges, there are 105 Latinos, which obviously will be reduced to 102 in January after a few retirements. Similarly, African Americans make up approximately 18% of the state's population, but only 13.5% of its judges. And Asian Americans make up 9% of the population, but only 2.7% of the judges. Women, as most of us know, make up 51% of the population, but only 41% of judges. And LGBTQ people make up only 4.3% of the judiciary. So by contrast, Caucasians, that is non-Hispanic Latino Caucasians, make up approximately 55% of the state population. Yet Caucasian judges make up over 76% of New York's judiciary. So upstate New York, when you separate downstate and upstate, in upstate, the numbers are just startling. For example, among Supreme Court justices outside New York City, only 29% are women. 29% are women, I repeat. 6.5% are African American, and 1.9% are Latino. Remember, I told you 20% of the population are Latino. Only 1.9% are Latino in upstate New York. And zero, that is, there are no judges in upstate New York that are of Asian descent. By contrast, in upstate New York, 91% are Caucasian. 91%. Additionally, 100% of surrogate court judges outside New York City are Caucasians. Only in New York City, downstate, do we have Rita, Mella, for example, elected surrogate in Manhattan. And there are other judges, surrogates of color in downstate New York. But upstate, there are no surrogate court judges. And of course, 75% upstate are men elected to the bench. Simply put, despite significant progress, our great state still does not have a fairly representative, sufficiently diverse court system. So the question becomes then, what can we do about this? Well, I think that one thing that I have suggested in an article on this very subject earlier in the year, that proposal recently became law. I proposed that a reporting requirement needs to be in place, or the mechanism to increase accountability for achieving the goal of increasing diversity in the courts. And just last month, Governor Cuomo signed into law a bill that requires the chief administrative judge of the courts to compile a report demographic data on judges, on state judges, including information about ethnicity and race. I think this is a good start because obviously you can't change what you don't measure. You can't leave it to the goodwill of folks without having a solid base on which to make decisions and elect judges of color and women. In addition, I think that all of us, judges, attorneys, and legal scholars, should seek out ways to further judicial diversity in New York and beyond. We should expand and promote educational opportunities, for example, to increase awareness on relevant issues like implicit bias, for instance, in order to ensure fairness and impartiality in our justice system. We should also improve outreach efforts to women and minority bar associations in order to explain the judicial vetting process. This is something that President De Felipe's mentioned before we started this program. Perhaps this is something that we can get off the ground fairly soon so that the judges in this panel can meet and discuss how to become a judge, what are the steps that we need to take. In fact, Angela Badamo and Lourdes Ventura will be talking a little bit about their trajectory and how they ascended to the bench. And I think this is the kind of thing that we need to do on a regular basis so that we can begin to increase awareness on that process. We do have great judges in this state that can share how they got there so that we can get a more diverse judiciary. And of course, we should consider, and this is something that I feel very strongly about, we should consider creating a statewide commissioner or ombudsman or ombudsperson of judicial diversity so that we can really focus in on this issue. We have made measurable progress, I believe, towards greater diversity, but of course, there's much more work to be done. If we continue supporting measures to ensure the fair representation of our gorgeous mosaic, as my former boss, who just recently passed away, Mayor David Dinkins, I believe that we will improve the quality of judicial decision-making while enhancing the legitimacy of the third branch of government in the eyes of every New Yorker. Now, let me pass the baton to Manny Mendez to give some more Dominican specific numbers. Do I pass it to you, Lynette, Jeanette, or Manny? You're muted, Jeanette.
I thought you were going to introduce Manny. I can do it.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
No. Jeanette, you go ahead and introduce Manny.
Thank you, Rolando. I was going to do it anyway, but you know. So first of all, Judge Mendez's story, as you're going to hear throughout this, throughout today's panel, each judge on this panel, including Rita, who doesn't really want to talk, but I'm going to call on a little bit later, has a different story. And Manny's story is amazing in that he is the only judge of Dominican descent that went to law school in Dominican Republic and became a lawyer in New York State. And I know for myself, there are so many lawyers from Dominican Republic here that haven't been able to cross that barrier that Manny has. So Manny began his legal career at the Legal Aid Society like Judge Acosta and myself, left that to do private practice, was elected to civil court, subsequently to Supreme Court, and very recently became our second judge of Dominican descent to go to the First Department Appellate Division. I, of course, am a fan of Judge Mendez because I was his first court attorney, and I always throw that plug in there. Without further ado, the Honorable Manuel J. Mendez.
Thank you very much, Llinét. You always throw the plug in, right?
Sorry, Manny, you're stuck with me.
Well, you know, it's not bad. That's not bad. Not a bad thing. Judge Acosta spoke about diversity on the bench, and I want to speak more specifically about Dominicans on the bench and how it is that we got there, and what it takes in reality to get there. We in the 1990s we had an issue in our community in Washington Heights. That's where the majority of the Dominican community was concentrated at the time. It was the issue of Kiko Garcia, and there was a rift and a lot of community suspicion with the police department after Kiko Garcia got killed. And I remember that Justice Acosta and I and a few other lawyers, we had a meet with members of the community on a couple of occasions to explain to them what the process was, what a grand jury was, and if these particular police officers that had been accused of having killed this young man got acquitted, you know, why it was that this was happening and how it was that the system worked. Well, to make a long story short, out of that community resentment with the police department at the time evolved, I guess it was a plan, but you know, we got our first judge simply to show the community that that we could participate in the system and make sure that the system was there for us when we needed it. Our first judge, Fabiola Soto, was elected in 1993, and she was elected to the civil court. She sat in the criminal court. And I remember that in that time, I was still with the Legal Aid Society, and it made a heck of a difference walking into the courtroom and seeing Judge Fabiola Soto up there dispensing justice. And it made a lot of difference. It made a lot of difference for me as a practicing attorney and for my clients who, for the most part, were Latino and African-American, seeing a person of color sitting on the bench and someone that understood us and that not only culturally, but also because she came from the community. And you felt comfortable whenever Justice Soto made a decision that she was doing it knowing what kind of impact that decision was going to have on the life of the person that was standing in front of her. And you felt comfortable. You didn't feel as if somehow, that's what the clients would say, that they didn't feel as if somehow they were getting punished, or that the person that was on the bench didn't understand who they were. Well, after Judge Soto, our next judge to ascend to the bench was Justice Acosta, also elected to the civil court. And it's very important to understand that we have taken advantage of the elected route to ascend to the bench, especially in the early days, because appointments to the bench, especially for Dominican judges, were difficult and rare. But we did have in Washington Heights, because of the numbers of our electorate, we did have the power to elect judges to the bench, and we took advantage of that. So Justice Acosta becomes elected to the civil court. Justice Julia Rodriguez, who is now elected to the Supreme Court, was our first judge to be appointed, but she was appointed to the Housing Court, a very important court where, you know, it was very important to have someone like her there because, of course, our people come a lot into the Housing Court. And so I know that she made a difference and people felt comfortable having a Julia Rodriguez there in the Housing Court whenever they had a housing issue, because they felt that she would understand what their situation was. After Julia Rodriguez becomes appointed, Justice Acosta becomes elected to the Supreme Court, and I become elected to the Civil Court. And Julia becomes elected to the Civil Court in the Bronx. I have a picture in my chambers where in 2007, all of the judges of Dominican descent, we all made a trip to the Dominican Republic. And there's only 6 of us there. And that's 2007. The judges in that picture are Fabiola Soto, Rolando Acosta, Julia Rodriguez, Dixia Pineda, who was elected to the Civil Court in Queens in 2002, myself, elected to the Civil Court in Manhattan in 2003, and Judge Rita Mella, who had been elected to the Civil Court in Manhattan in 2006, when Judge Soto was appointed by the governor to the Court of Claims. So now in 2006, in 2007, we have only 6 judges, all of whom have been elected, and one who has recently been appointed to the Court of Claims, which is a very special court that is appointed by the governor. It's the governor's court, the governor's bench, and only handles very special cases that are brought against the state of New York. From that point in 2007 up until now, there have been an additional 14 Dominican judges elected and appointed to the bench. Most of the judges have been elected. Our newest judge, who was elected this year to the Civil Court, and I say our newest judge elected this year, is Judge Nestor Diaz, who was elected to the Civil Court in Queens County. But this year also, we have Judge Bianka Perez, who was elected to the Supreme Court. And over the years, as judges have been elected to the Supreme Court, have vacated their civil court seat, other Dominicans have come in and they have been elected to that seat into the civil court. So over the years, we have our 21 judges in New York, and there's one judge in Newark, Victoria Pratt. But our judges elected to the Civil Court and the Supreme Court are in the order that they have been elected: Fabiola Soto, Rolando Acosta, Julia Rodriguez, Dixia Pineda, myself, Maria Arias, appointed to the Family Court, Nilda Morales, elected to the Family Court in Westchester County, Rita Mella, of course, elected to the Civil Court and then subsequently elected as surrogate of Manhattan, New York County, which is a very special court that handles the estates of very wealthy individuals. And Rita is one of two, and we're very proud of Rita. And I guess, I mean, I hope that she can tell us a little bit about her court and what she does there, because it's very important what she does. Helen Bucinas, who was, she's our only judge and is now elected to the Supreme Court in Nassau County in Long Island. She's our only judge out there. Leticia Ramirez, elected to the Civil Court in New York County, now sitting in Family Court. Emily Morales, also elected to the Civil Court. Denise Dominguez, who was elected to the Civil Court after Rita Mella was elected to the Surrogate Court. So you can see how we succeed each other. Fiordalisa Rodriguez, elected to the, appointed to the Family Court. Bianka Perez, who's now elected to the Supreme. Lourdes Ventura, from whom we'll hear a little later, who was elected to Civil Court in Queens and is now elected to the Supreme Court. And I don't know if Nestor is taking over Lourdes, the seat that Lourdes vacated in Civil Court in Queens County. Patria Frias, our only judge elected to the Civil Court in Brooklyn. Angela Badamo, who is appointed criminal in Manhattan. Keisha Espinal, also appointed to the criminal court. And Nestor Diaz, recently elected to the Civil Court. Rolando Acosta is our first judge elected to the Supreme Court and our first judge appointed to the Appellate Division and the presiding justice of the Appellate Division, which means that he runs the department. He's in charge of all of the courts in the Bronx and Manhattan, and in essence, he is the boss of all of the judges in those two counties, civil, criminal, and supreme. And, you know, it's a big thing to have a Dominican in charge of the department. I know Rolando, I've known him before we were each judges, you know, same neighborhood. We worked together with the Dominican Bar Association. And Rolando understands what our people are going through, have gone through, and he runs the department in that fashion. He knows that judges have to be sensitive to the cultural differences of the people that come before them. We can't simply apply the law as if the law was an abstract thing. The law affects people's lives, and it affects our people's lives. Rolando understands that. And he has made it a point, I mean, we've had conversation, that when we do apply the law, we have to take that into consideration. How is it that our decisions are going to be affecting other people's lives? And that's what we bring to the bench as Dominicans. Our diversity, but also our cultural sensitivity to how our decisions are going to affect the lives of the people that come before us. This is very important. Now, our, as I said, we have 22 judges on the bench. Out of 3,000 and some judges in the state, it is not a big number. It is 0.01% of the state's judiciary, which means that there's a lot of room for us to grow. We need lawyers and others to aspire to become judges. And I agree. And like I told you when we started in Brooklyn, Llinét, my job was to open doors and to make sure that those doors remain open. I am now in the Appellate Division, First Department with Justice Acosta. But that's not the end of the road. I mean, we have to continue to not only become an inspiration to other younger lawyers, to our students, to our entire population, that it can be done. If we have done it, others can do it. But we also have to give them the tools and the information so that they can take advantage and participate and aspire and be able to do the things that we have done. Most of our judges have been elected, but there are opportunities for attorneys who don't want to be full-time outside the city of New York, who want to be part-time judges. They can do that, because outside the city of New York, you can be a part-time judge in a village or a town. And we also have to let them know that you can also be appointed, although that route, I don't know that much about that route. We'll hear about that from Angela. But, you know, you don't need to run. You can also be appointed. And there are many courts out there where you can be a part of. Lourdes and Angela will speak about their experiences, how they became judges. It's going to be, most of us have very similar experiences. You know, we participated in community service and we did things for our community, but you got to know what it is that you need to do in order for you to be able to participate and somehow ascend to the bench and increase our numbers in the judiciary. Will you be introducing Lourdes, or?
I'll take Lourdes on.
Okay.
All right, so at this point, I'm going to introduce Lourdes Ventura, our justice from Queens County. As you see, there's 6 judges on the screen. 4 of us were born in Dominican Republic and immigrated here, and 2 of us weren't. And Lourdes is one of our judges today who was actually born in Queens County to parents of Dominican descent that met here after immigrating from the Dominican Republic. Since I want Lourdes to speak as to her story, I'm just going to hit certain points. Lourdes is a graduate of SUNY University at Buffalo and SUNY Buffalo Law School. She has an amazing resume in that she's worked in private practice, in public interest, as well as in the government. She's also was elected civil court and a year later elected Supreme Court. You know, I'm hoping she'll share that secret. That was amazing. Without further ado, the Honorable Lourdes M. Ventura.
Thank you, sister. Buenos dias, and thank you. And I just want to thank Ana por la invitación. As you can see, I speak Spanish and English. I was born and raised in Corona, Queens, but I am fluent because my mother, my father, they made sure that I had to understand and speak Spanish and still keep in touch with my family in the Dominican Republic and get to know them too. My story began with my parents meeting here in Queens and getting married, having me. At some point, things didn't go well in their marriage. They were divorced, and then I became the eldest and the only English-speaking person in the household. So I ultimately had to assist my mother, who had myself and I have 2 other siblings, just to get around the system and navigate. There were times we fell on hard times and we had to seek public assistance. I used to go to appointments with her. I used to translate for her, and then she would loan me out to other people there that needed translators. And, that's how I became a young advocate, I suppose. I wasn't expecting that. And at that time, I wasn't understanding it. I just know that I felt bothered every time I was like, Lourdes, ve y tradúzale a esa gente que mira, tienen problema. And she would just share me. But thank God she did, because it showed me an appreciation for people, getting to know people, understanding their needs. And that was very helpful in growing up. I went to all public schools in Corona, Queens. I then went to college in Buffalo at the State University of Buffalo. And throughout my life, I was always involved with outside things, not just academics. So for example, when I was growing up in Corona, Queens, I was a member of my church, Our Lady of Sorrows, and I was active there. I had part-time jobs. I worked at a doctor's office. I worked at Favor Shoes. I was always involved doing things. And ultimately, when I went to college, I joined the clubs. I joined the Latina sorority in Buffalo. I joined Poder, I joined LASA, and I joined all these things while still maintaining my academics. While I was undergrad at Buffalo, I was informed that because I had decent grades, that I was going to get a fellowship to graduate school. So I still was in the help mode. I want to help people. I want to be, a social worker. But originally, I went to college for architecture. Obviously, I'm not an architect. So I said, okay, let me apply to the master's program of social work, which I did, and I was accepted. And then I got the news that the fellowship was for 4 years. That's when I was like, 4 years? And they're like, 4 years of free graduate money. So I said, you know what? Let me look into the programs. People throughout my life had been telling me, you should be a lawyer someday. I never wanted to be a lawyer, never thought about it, but now I got some free money. So I found that Buffalo had the JD MSW program, the law and social work. So I applied to that. I got into both programs, and that's why I went to law school, part of the reason why I went to law school. When I was 18 years old, I keep going back and forth because it all makes sense at the end. But when I was 18 years old, I interacted with my first lawyer. He's one of the first people that said that I should be a lawyer someday. He was a Caucasian male who worked for legal aid in Queens County. A vecino needed a translator that came and grabbed me, and that's how I met him. So he told me I can do it. So when I told him I had this opportunity, he said, you have to apply to law school. So I did it. So now I'm in law school. Again, I get involved. I'm doing my academics. I'm a hostess at E.B. Green's Steakhouse in downtown Buffalo. I was president of LALSA. I was everywhere. And those experiences were very interesting in Buffalo, New York. Then from there, I graduated from law school. And my first job that I worked at was at the Queens DA's office. I was a prosecutor. So being a prosecutor in New York City, I would not change it for the world. It was the best training that I had. What's interesting about it is, like in other levels, just like in the courts that, we are lacking some diversity, even though we're making progress, the DA's office was similar. I was the only Latina in a class of 27 students that entered that year, or 27 new DAs that entered that year. And the office did have a low number of minorities. When I entered that job, I was conflicted because I grew up in Corona, Queens. I grew up in the hood. I knew a lot of people of all kinds. And when I was there as a prosecutor, there were times that defendants would come up to the well, and I knew them from the neighborhood. And at that time, I felt conflicted. I'm like, wow, I'm here on this side. I should probably be defending these people that live in my community, and here I am. But what I learned is that, there's always the yin and the yang. So as a prosecutor, there are victims. So I had to protect and, dispense justice for our victims. And at the same time, I had a great opportunity to investigate and see if the person that's being accused really did this. So it was a great opportunity. From there, I stayed 4 years, and then I went to the Attorney General's office where I did civil rights work. And that opportunity came from another fellow Dominican. His name is Andy Lugo. He told me, hey, there's an opening at the Attorney General's office. Do you want to apply? And I applied. So I say that to say that when opportunities came to me, I jumped on them. I tried not to hesitate, not to think too much about it. So, it was brought to me for a reason, let me try. And I got the job. So I was there for 4 years at the Attorney General's office. And while I was there, I met certain people through my extracurricular activities. So while I was working as an attorney, I became involved in the bar associations. So when I was at the DA's office, I became involved with the Latino Lawyers Association of Queens County. I became president of that association, one of the youngest presidents. And then from there, I also joined the Queens County Bar Association, the Queens County Women's Bar Association, and so on and so forth. The Dominican Bar Association, that's how I met Llinét and Manny and Rolando and Rita and the people that are on this call today. So I'm thankful for that. I also, at the same time, was involved in my local politics. So when I graduated from law school, my Jewish sixth grade math teacher, who was involved with UFT, he was a vice president at the time I graduated from law school, said, Lourdes, it's great that you graduated from law school and you think you're going to be a hotshot lawyer, but you need to get involved in your community if you want to even become a bigger hotshot lawyer in Queens County. So I said, okay. So I took his advice, and right away he introduced me to my first district, Democratic District Club. And there I started getting engaged in the community on a local level. So from 1998 up until I became a judge, I was politically active, and I was active in my community. So right there, people are getting to know me on a community level, through the bar associations, on a colleague and legal level, and on many levels. From the Attorney General's office, then I went to the law firm, a private practice for 5 months at Amity Demers and McManus. And then I met a senator from Queens who invited me to come join the New York State Senate in his cabinet. So again, opportunity. So I was just at that job for 5 months, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to leave this job? And I said, you know what? It's an opportunity. Let me speak to the job. They understood. I left. I went to the New York State Senate. I was there for 4 years. And then when it was time to leave there, I went right back to that firm that I had just been at for 5 months. They took me back, because another thing I've learned in life is never to burn your bridges, and keep developing your relationships with others. And I'm speaking so fast and I want to say so much because I have so much advice, but that is my road. Finally, at Amity Demers and McManus, I stayed there for 8 years. When I went back, they told me, what is your long-term goal? Because they were concerned that I might want to leave since I left after 5 months the first time. So I told them, I've been, it's been brought to my attention that, I should consider a judgeship in the future and things like that. So they always knew where I planned on going, and they were very supportive. While I was there, I became president of the Queens County Women's Bar Association. I was the first Latina to ever hold that post. And at that time, the organization was 81 years old. So that assisted me and propelled me to other things. Then I became the first Latina officer for the State Women's Bar Association. And that's led me to other opportunities. And ultimately, 20 years of political activity, community activity, 20 years of legal practice, then came the next step, the judgeship. So I has started seeking to become a judge in 2011, because in 2009, I actually had tried to run for the assembly in New York State. At that time, there was no Latina representation in the assembly. So in 2011, I was told, why don't you try to run for a judgeship? So from 2011 to 2018, when I finally was nominated and elected in civil court, that was 7 years I was trying to become a judge. So becoming a judge doesn't happen overnight. So yes, I went from civil court 1 year to Supreme Court, but it was 7 years that I was trying to become a judge. Other individuals do have other opportunities because they have maybe relationships, dads or relatives that are already judges, and they move on quicker. It does happen. But for me, this Dominican girl from Corona, Queens, it took a little longer. But at the end of the day, I'm thankful because I continue to build relationships. Now when I'm on the bench, I'm respected in a different way because I understand. I was a lawyer for 20 years. I practiced, I litigated. I have a lot of experiences that the lawyers that are coming before me are also having, and they know that I will understand in a different way. Also, being Dominicana and bringing that experience to the table and to the bench, when I sit on that bench, I am thankful and I am proud. And I understand that I did not get there by accident. And it means something to the person that's sitting out there waiting for their case to be heard. I remember one time in small claims court, after I heard a case, a woman's like, I do not mean to be disrespectful. And then she put her fist up and she goes, you look fierce up there, sister. It was exciting for another woman to see me, and she a woman of color, me a woman of color, to be up on the bench. So, you know, I don't want to take up too much more time. I just want to say that querer es poder. If you want something, do not let anyone challenge you and try to take that ambition and that drive out of you, and to seize the opportunities that you can. And again, I'm just thankful to have been presenting today with these giants. I am excited, and I'm excited for everyone that's listening, because if it's your dream to be in the law, don't let anyone steal that dream and that joy away from you. All right, thank you.
We're now going to hear from the Honorable Angela Badamo, who obtained her bachelor's degree from SUNY Binghamton and her Juris Doctorate from Washington and Lee University School of Law. Angela also began her career at the Legal Aid Society, but she went where all the very, very smart people go, which is the Criminal Appeals Bureau. And then she left that to go where I don't know if any other Dominican has ever gone, which is to the New York State Unified Court System as an assistant deputy. And she remained there. And I'm so proud of that, Angela. And she remained there low key. If you know Angela, she's low key, but everyone knew she was Dominican. In 2017, then Mayor, still Mayor de Blasio appointed Angela to criminal court in New York County. Without further ado, the Honorable Angela Badamo.
Technology can prove more challenging than anything else for me these days. Good morning to everyone. Again, I echo my colleagues in thanking you for having us here today. I'm excited to be here and to talk about this process. And this is the very type of event that my colleagues have already stressed is a crucial piece of the effort of achieving greater diversity in New York State's judiciary. I am, in the interest of time, I'm going to try to abbreviate the personal piece of my story, but I also grew up in Queens, in Richmond Hill. And I would say the big cultural piece of my background, my mom came to New York when she was 17 and worked her tail off. And came from a family of very progressive Dominican women who knew that the way to go forward was education. So that was inculcated in me at every step of the way. Our house was also kind of like another little consulate. Everyone who came from the DR made a stop in our house, lived with us, got advice from my parents. So that tradition of lifting yourself and also those coming behind you was very, very rooted in my house. So I want to fast forward a little bit to the process itself and maybe some of the mechanics of the appointed process so that everybody could get a picture of that. I'm happy to talk offline more about my personal story, I guess, but I came through the appointment process, and I will share with you my personal experience with being appointed to the New York City Criminal Court. At this point now, I was appointed to that court by, as Llinét said, Mayor Bill de Blasio, now just over 3.5 years. And I preside in Manhattan, so down at 100 Center Street. And prior to that, way back when, I did start at the Legal Aid Society. Then I was actually a law clerk right after that. And then I moved over to the Office of Court Administration. So with all of those different stops, and much like Lourdes, I am diligent, a hard worker. I got engaged in all of the work that I did. Opportunities kind of presented themselves to me, and I would say also with Lourdes, presented because you were doing so well in the work that you were doing and sought out by other people who thought you could excel at even bigger challenges and achievements. So I took the time. I love criminal law, and that was my background in law school. I was in a clinical program there. Also, another note about taking opportunities as they come. I'm, a true New Yorker, never wanted to leave, not even the state, never even wanted to leave the city. I love Manhattan, I love New York City. And when I was at SUNY Binghamton, an advisor said to me, what do you think about, I already knew I wanted to attend law school. What do you think about law school in Virginia? And I said, Virginia, that sounded like another planet to me. And he said, there is a small law school there. They are lacking in diversity. They would be happy to have you visit, and they're offering a lot of money, which really resonated with me. So I was reluctant. I was set on staying in New York City, but I took the trip, and it was a very different world. But what I saw was a very small, intimate school, a school where, I met some of the professors who seemed amazing. And I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. And I attended law school in Lexington, Virginia. It was a challenging experience in that it was a place where the law student, I had never been at a school where the student body was more conservative than the professors, but that was the case there. I would march to class in my overalls or my sweatshirt, and there were women sitting in class with pearls and dresses on. So that was very distinct for me as well. But it was a great education. I developed very close relationships with the professors. I was in a clinical program that assisted women prisoners in a federal prison camp. So I got, hands-on experience. It was just a wonderful time. I was extremely happy to leave Virginia though. Very beautiful area of the country, but just not the mix that I felt the most comfortable in. So again, fast forward to my time as a law clerk and in the court system. I had a focus in criminal law when I was a law clerk, to the Honorable Annalisa Torres, who is now on the federal bench in the Southern District and who has been my champion and a mentor and a friend. And that work was in the criminal court of New York City and also civil court. Then from there, I moved into court administration, also with a focus in the area of criminal law, working with the Committee on Criminal Jury Instructions, working with the New York State Sentencing Commission. I also had an opportunity to go to the civil side, and after the financial crisis, I worked on residential foreclosure cases, which again was kind of out of my zone of what I liked, but a great learning experience. I did a little work with some of the family court policies. So I say this to highlight that, as Lourdes did, sometimes you have different opportunities that don't seem like they are lining up with perhaps what you like or your area of interest, but you should always look at those and take, draw from them skills, other knowledge of other areas of law, because those are all wonderful in going forward with an application for the bench. So getting to the very technical piece of the appointment process for the New York City Criminal Court, that process is governed by the Mayor's Committee, the Mayor's Advisory Committee on the Judiciary. That is a committee, I believe now it is at 19 members, about 19 or 20, and there are various constituencies represented. So there could be people from sort of the defense advocate world, there are people from legal academia, people from the prosecutor's side, just a very varied selection of people. I'm happy to say that there is greater diversity in that committee now. And we even have on the committee a former president of the Dominican Bar Association as a member. So that is wonderful. And I had the pleasure of going through one of my reappointment processes with her on the committee. So there are two pieces of the appointment process to the New York City Criminal Court. And Llinét, I'm going to rely on you in terms of timing in case I need to abbreviate even more. So those two broad pieces are the submission of a written application, and that application is extremely lengthy and comprehensive. If I recall correctly, it's about 20 pages long. It calls for you to detail information about your career, why you would be a good candidate for the bench. Also, as part of that application, you give the committee a set of recommenders, essentially people who are familiar with your work, can speak to your work and the attributes that would make you suitable for the bench, and who will support your application. The committee will review your written application once it's submitted. And let me tell you that preparing that application and getting it submitted is a weeks long or months long process. It's, you know, a lot, or in my case, I organized, I reorganized, I outlined, I drafted, I edited, I came back to it. And I say this also, you know, I want to give credit to all of the other editors because it was not, you know, a process that I undertook lightly or on my own. And I had many wonderful editors who, you know, had gone through the process or who were already sitting on the bench who helped me in you know, editing the application and preparing it for submission. After that process, if your application is approved by a subcommittee, or actually first by staff of the committee, I should also say that the requirements of making the application are that you have been a member of the bar for at least 10 years. So you have to have been admitted for at least 10 years, and also you have to be a member in good standing of the bar. And those are the only requirements. And then your experience speaks for itself. Again, once that written submission is reviewed for any technical issues, or you know, it is deemed suitable for continuing the application process, I would say, I'm not sure how it is right at this moment, but there is somewhat, I would say, in my personal opinion, a lack of transparency around the process. So the applications are received on a continuing basis, and you are evaluated against the current pool of applicants that the committee has. I had no idea of what that number of applicants were. And then there are a number of vacancies, either from judges who have moved on in their careers. The mayor also receives vacancies on terms of civil court judges when they move on to other positions. But that number is never something, at least for me, it wasn't something that I was aware of or that I sort of knew what my odds were. So I just stayed focused on, you know, my piece of it and the application, even without those other pieces of broader information. So after that written application is forwarded to a subcommittee for review, that subcommittee reaches out to your recommenders. It reaches out to your schools, any employers that you have listed, to verify that information, and also to get a sense of your work with those places and your career trajectory. And then you are called for the start of an interview process. That is a series of many rounds of interviews, and it includes interviews with the subcommittee that has reviewed your application. If you pass that interview, the subcommittee passes it on to the full advisory committee. Then you meet with the full committee of 19 or 20 people, where you are peppered with questions about your knowledge of the law, your knowledge of evidence rules, your perspectives on policy and current events. And it also includes, that series includes interviews with the mayor's staff, as well as culminating, if you pass all of the rounds, an interview with the mayor herself or himself. In my case, it was Mayor de Blasio. And then there are 3 candidates for each vacancy forwarded to the mayor. The mayor makes his or his selection from the 3 candidates. And then at that point, you are passed to the City Bar Association for review by that body, and then 2 interviews with a subcommittee of the City Bar, and then the full City Bar, where you're again peppered with questions from about 20 or more people. It's a very intense process. It's a months-long process, sometimes over a year, depending on how the interviews go. It could be that you stop at some point and then later the committee commences and you are asked to resume the process depending on how many vacancies there are or how many the makeup of the pool. It could be that you are considered a suitable candidate but not selected by the mayor and you remain in a pool. And again, all of those processes are not extremely transparent, but it is sort of a rolling basis. And I would say that anyone who goes through the process and has a bump or a pause, that you should just come back to the process. And in the interest of time, I will stop there. I just want to say that some of the pluses that I have seen with respect to diversity, again, as I mentioned, those groups where there are actually decision makers and the selection people, I see those groups getting more diverse. At least I can speak for the appointment process for the mayor's committee. There's more diversity there. Certainly being Latina, being Dominican and a woman, I saw less faces that were like mine, but I would say that immediately upon commencing my application process, those faces that were there reached out to me. The network snapped into action. And I got a lot of support from people I had known from before, from people, Latino, Dominican, and otherwise. So I would also encourage everyone, this is not something that should be done in a vacuum. You should speak to people who have been through the process. I sat with judges who were sitting at the time I was making the application to become familiar with the issues that were coming up, what was happening in the courts, and to be aware of that. And I consider this presentation a beginning of a link for everybody who's on. So definitely feel free to reach out to me. I know I speak for my colleagues as well. This is not, again, does not have to be done in a vacuum. There is a network. We want this pipeline to keep going, and we want these links to continue and to grow. So I'm happy to take any questions now, but also if they come up later, I think the contact information will be shared or through Llinét. And good luck to everyone in all the processes you are at the moment and going forward.
Thanks, Angela. I saved the best for last, and she's already rolling her eyes at me, but I want to speak about Judge Rita Mella, who was born in Dominican Republic, who is a sensation, especially in this community. Everybody knows her. Rita was born in Dominican Republic and immigrated to the United States at the age of 22. Upon graduating from CUNY Law School, where she also taught as an adjunct professor, she worked for a small criminal defense law firm and then left that to work as a law clerk for 13 years in many different courts. In 2007, Judge Rita Mella was elected to New York County's Civil Court. And in 2013, Rita started this campaign for Surrogate. And it was like David and Goliath. And Rita won that election. Look, I still get goosebumps over that. And became our first surrogate of Dominican descent. I want to take a moment before I pass it over to Rita, because I just want her to speak to the group, to tell you that I met Rita as a young attorney at the DBA, and she is one of those women that's like opening doors and holding them open with her heels, like, ven, entrate, come in, and has always been an outlet for me and a lot of the younger women lawyers as to si se puede. And I would love if Rita would touch upon that amazing win in 2013, if she feels like it. Without further ado, the Honorable Bella Rita Mella.
Hola, ¿cómo están? ¿Cómo están hoy? Un saludo especial hoy para la presidenta Daisy Coco de Felipe. No sabe el orgullo que tenemos todos de que tú estés en esa posición, Daisy. Otro saludo especial a mi hermanito Pablo Mella, que está con nosotros hoy y quien será uno de los panelistas esta tarde en la en otro de los paneles. Y también, bueno, un saludo aquí en mi hermano Pablo, los que están aquí participando en el panel. Ginette, honorable Ginette Rosado, ¿está segura que está hablando de mí cuando se refiere de esta manera a mí? Bueno, lo que quería enfatizar hoy es dos cosas que han hecho, que varios de ustedes, de los participantes, han mencionado. One is this notion that you should be open to opportunities that come your way. So Angela mentioned that, Lourdes mentioned that, Manny mentioned that. You know, sometimes things come up and you should always be open to exploring things, even if they are outside of your comfort zone. Yo soy una persona sumamente tímida. La verdad es que, como decía la honorable Ginette Rosado, yo le había dicho a ella que no quería hablar hoy, es porque realmente mi papel, pienso yo, mi papel en la vida es estar en una esquina haciendo mi trabajo calladita. Pero cuando se me presentó la oportunidad de acceder a una posición en la judicatura a través del proceso político, electoral, político, algo que para mí era como realmente imposible de alcanzar, porque yo realmente soy una persona tímida, que no me gusta estar en el medio, ni en la candela, como decimos. Fue el estar abierta a esa posibilidad y entenderlo como una manera de servirle a la comunidad de la que yo venía. Es precisamente por ver la importancia del proceso de la representación de personas de origen dominicano en los diferentes niveles del gobierno, ¿no? O de las instancias gubernamentales, que yo entonces estuve de acuerdo y de entrar en este proceso electoral que fue tan complicado. Yo tuve 2 elecciones muy reñidas, muy reñidas. Lo puede decir mi hermano que vino desde Santo Domingo a ayudarme, sobre todo en la última elección del proceso de entrar como a la Corte de Sucesiones, Surrogate Court. Pero, en fin, no cerrarse a las posibilidades, a las oportunidades que presenta la vida. Me pareció sumamente importante enfatizar ese punto, que como digo, lo habían mencionado otros de los participantes. Finalmente, quiero hablar brevemente acerca de la importancia de que estemos, personas de origen dominicano, estemos en estos escaños, en estas posiciones. Y es por lo que decía Ginette ahora, porque abrimos puertas, porque en realidad creamos un pipeline. Como dijo Manny, la posición que yo ocupé fue la que dejó vacía Fabiola Soto cuando a ella la nombraron en una posición más alta. Y cuando yo accedí a la Corte de Sucesiones, se la dejé abierta para Denise Domínguez. Y esto es algo que es de suma importancia. El estar en estas posiciones crea la posibilidad de que otros que vienen detrás de nosotros puedan acceder a las mismas. Y es por eso que creo que este tipo de paneles, incluso ya que, o sea, este panel es parte de una conferencia de estudios dominicanos que por lo general no da cabida a cuestiones de este tipo, right? Es una cuestión sumamente académica por lo general, pero es importante que hablemos en estos medios, precisamente como decía la magistrada Badamo, porque abrimos esas puertas en otros medios en los que realmente por lo general no nos movemos. O sea que gracias por esta oportunidad. Y aquí estamos siempre a la orden para cualquier persona que tenga preguntas o que quiera una orientación. Gracias.
Ana, en las 9:45, tú me dices.
Bueno,
Usted tiene nuestro emails, Anna, you know you can always bring us back. I don't want to mess you up. You tell me.
no,
We'll
no,
take
it's,
what-
it's fine. I'm so proud of the work.
Ana,
No se oye.
okay, ahora sí.
I am so proud of the presentation and the work and the roles you perform. I just wish that all of you will be able to come back to share all this wonderful information with the students, because many of them aspire to reach the levels that you have reached in the court system. So, Rita, honorable Manuel Mendes, honorable Rita Mella, honorable Lourdes Ventura, honorable Ángela Badamo y mi queridísima amiga, honorable Llinét Rosado. Es para mí un inmenso honor y placer el haberlos tenido en este panel y nada, como mencionó la presidenta previamente, debemos de regresar y continuar este tipo de diálogo a través de las veladas ostosianas, que la presidenta es muy dinámica y le encanta compartir con profesionales como ustedes, ¿no? Para que las futuras generaciones puedan continuar ese maravilloso trabajo que ustedes hacen. Presidenta, I don't know if you, is your turn now?
I don't have a turn here, but I'm happy to take a
You
turn.
always have a turn.
To say, you know, the beautiful message this morning, it has been so powerful, is how, first of all, how you know each other and support each other. And the message that querer es poder. And you try, and that help comes to you from multiple parts, different folks, you know, and how important it is for you to be in this space. I think for our students, we have a legal studies program. It's a very powerful message. I think the veladas ostosianas give us a little more time to have conversations that perhaps we could do. If you all think about it and you're interested, si están interesados, quizá una serie de conversaciones sobre una carrera de abogados o cómo llegar al magisterio. Bellísimo también ver tantas mujeres que son jueces. Eso es divinísimo. Con todo el cariño, que yo soy una hermana muy querida de mis hermanos y tengo 3 hijos, pero yo creo que los espacios para las mujeres son importantes también. Y así es que, sobre todo, se les agradece la gran paciencia de estar con nosotros tan temprano un sábado. Y yo entendemos esta, mi querida Ana Isabel, mi hermanita, y el profesor Silvio Torres Sayán, han hecho un trabajo, yo le llamamos a esto, love in the time of a pandemic, que hayan montado una conferencia así y que tengamos tantos compañeros de tantas partes del mundo. Lo que nos separa nos ha unido en que por lo menos de esta manera podemos estar juntos y mantener el corazón, el alma, el espíritu, el intelecto vivo. Muchísimas gracias, pero muchísimas gracias por este
Que viva
evento.
la patria.
Así mismo.
Okay.
Maravilloso, muchísimas gracias. Un honor para nosotros tenerlas
Exacto.
a todos ustedes. Y a Manny, fabuloso, y a Rolando, que se retiró por compromisos, me imagino. Así es que nada, como dice la presidenta, nuestra casa es su casa. Y Llinét, que es una de nuestras profesoras, olvídese, fabuloso todo.
O sea que la conversación continúa, yo espero.
Seguro
Okay.
que sí. Lo que
Claro.
desean ustedes, nunca le dijimos no a Ana.
Ok.
So,
Yo tampoco le digo no.
no se le puede, Daisy, no se le puede decir que no. Ella no oye el no.
No se puede. Querer es poder, ¿verdad?
Exacto.
I just want to give a hand to everyone. Thank you.
Así
Thank
mismo.
you. Un honor.
Bueno.
Thank you.
Muy buen día. Muy buen día.
Have a good day, everyone.
Que pasen buen día. Muchísimas gracias.
Bye, Manny.
Bye bye.
Abrazos.